She always sat quietly in the corner, blending into the background while the world around her seemed to move at a faster pace. People often didn't notice her sometimes, they didn't even see her at all. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking. She didn't boast about her abilities or try to be the center of attention. She simply existed in a calm, almost invisible way, moving through life without drawing much notice. In school, in public events, or even in family gatherings, she was the kind of person that people assumed wouldn't stand out. And she liked it that way. The quiet gave her a sense of peace that she couldn't find anywhere else. That evening, she found herself in a small auditorium filled with people who were all there for the community music event. The lights were warm and soft, casting a golden glow on the stage and the shiny grand piano at the center. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and paper programs, a scent that always reminded her of calm afternoons spent alone with music. She had come simply to watch, to enjoy the melodies others would play, and to lose herself in the music for a few hours. She wasn't expecting anyone to notice her. The room was buzzing with energy. Students were chatting, teachers were laughing with each other, and parents were busy taking photos. Every now and then, someone would nervously walk toward the piano and perform a piece. Some played beautifully, others stumbled over notes, but all of them seemed to be there for the applause, the recognition, the thrill of being seen. And as she sat quietly in the back row, she watched them all with a gentle smile. She had seen this scene countless times before. People whispered about her from time to time. "Who is she?" someone asked once. Another replied, "I don't think she ever participates, she just sits there." No one seemed to pay much attention beyond that. She wasn't invisible because she wanted to be. She was invisible because she preferred it. There was a freedom in being unnoticed, a freedom that allowed her to think, to imagine, to dream without interruption, even though she seemed quiet and ordinary. There was a depth inside her that most people would never understand. Music had been a part of her life for as long as she could remember. She had spent countless hours practicing, not for recognition or praise, but because it brought her joy and comfort. Music was her sanctuary, a place where she could pour out her emotions without saying a word. She didn't talk about it much because she didn't feel the need to. To her, the piano was a friend, a companion who understood her better than anyone else ever could. As the evening went on, she continued to watch. Some performances were impressive, others less so, but she listened carefully to every note. She could sense the nervousness in the performers, the pride in the teachers, the excitement in the audience. She absorbed it all silently, letting each piece of music wash over her, letting the atmosphere of the room settle into her like a warm blanket. Then, without warning, something shifted. The host of the event, a cheerful and slightly mischievous person, clapped their hands to get everyone's attention. "All right, everyone," they said. "We've seen some wonderful performances tonight. But now I have a little challenge for someone unexpected." A few people laughed. The room fell into a quiet murmur. Wondering who the challenge would be for, all eyes scanned the room, searching for the person who would step forward. Some were confident, some nervous, and some curious. And then the host's gaze landed on her. A faint smile tugged at their lips. "Why don't we hear from our quiet guest over there?" They said. Laughter rippled through the room. Some of the older students exchanged amused looks, thinking this was a joke. "The quiet one?" someone whispered. "Sure, let's see what she can do." Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't show it. She remained calm, her expression soft, unreadable. People expected her to hesitate, to decline, to shy away. But something inside her stirred a quiet determination, a gentle courage that she had nurtured for years. She knew this was not about proving anything to anyone else. This was simply a moment, a fleeting opportunity to connect her soul with the music in a place where so many others were seeking applause and attention. Slowly, she rose from her seat. Each step toward the stage was deliberate, almost reverent. The room grew quieter as people realized she was actually going to do it. Some shifted in their seats, curious now, wondering what would happen. The louder, more confident students who had previously performed now felt a strange tension in their chests. They had assumed she would never step forward. They had assumed she was just another quiet face in the crowd. They were wrong. As she approached the piano, the light seemed to follow her in a subtle way, casting gentle shadows that made the moment feel almost cinematic. She didn't rush. She didn't stumble. She moved with grace, as if she belonged there, even if no one else realized it yet. She sat down, placed her hands on her lap for a moment, and closed her eyes. The room was silent, waiting for something extraordinary, though no one knew what. A teacher whispered to another, "Do you think she can actually play?" The others shook their heads slightly, a smile tugging at the corners of their mouth. They didn't mean to be unkind. It was just that they had learned to judge quickly, to make assumptions based on appearances. And in their eyes, this quiet girl seemed too reserved, too soft-spoken, too ordinary to surprise anyone. She opened her eyes and looked at the piano, her fingers hovering just above the keys. There was a softness in her gaze, a quiet confidence that wasn't loud or boastful but still undeniable. In that moment, it was clear that she wasn't afraid. She wasn't performing for attention or praise. She was about to do something that belonged entirely to her, a conversation between her soul and the piano. The audience held their breath. No one moved. No one whispered. Even the air seemed to pause, as if waiting for her to speak in the only way she could with music. She took a deep breath, and the room felt even quieter, more focused. Every eye was on her, yet she seemed to exist in a different world, a private place where only she and the piano mattered. And then, just as she was about to touch the keys, she paused for a brief moment. It wasn't hesitation. It was awareness, a recognition of the beauty of the moment, the anticipation, the electricity that ran through the room. And in that pause, something magical happened. The audience realized that this wasn't going to be an ordinary performance. Whatever she was about to play would not be measured by applause or attention. It would be measured by something far deeper, by the ability to touch hearts without words, to move people in ways they hadn't expected. She pressed her fingers lightly on the keys, and a single note filled the room. It was soft, delicate, and perfect. People leaned forward instinctively, captivated by the unexpected clarity and emotion. It wasn't loud or showy. It wasn't a statement demanding attention. It was a whisper that commanded everyone's focus in the most extraordinary way. In that moment, the quiet girl was no longer invisible. She had begun to reveal something that no one in the room had anticipated, a depth of talent and emotion that could not be ignored. No one knew yet how far her performance would go, but in that first note, the atmosphere changed. Curiosity turned into wonder. Amusement turned into respect. People who had whispered and laughed moments ago now watched with wide eyes, unsure of what they were witnessing. And she, the quiet girl who had always preferred the background, had begun to take her place in the center of a story that would soon leave everyone speechless. As she prepared to continue, there was no sense of nervousness on her face, no hint of pressure. She was not performing for them. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was simply doing what she had always loved, what she had always practiced in secret, what she had always known she could do. And in that simple, unassuming act, the first part of something remarkable had begun. The first note lingered in the room, soft and delicate, as if it had opened a door to a world everyone had forgotten existed. People shifted in their seats, their eyes glued to her, unsure of what was happening. The students who had laughed a moment ago felt a strange unease. They had expected a quiet, ordinary performance, maybe a few awkward notes and a polite smile at the end. Instead, they were witnessing something completely unexpected. She didn't rush. Each movement of her fingers was careful, precise, almost like a conversation she was having with the piano itself. The audience could feel it, even if they didn't fully understand it. There was emotion in every note, a story being told without words. Her hands moved gracefully across the keys, light and fluid, yet full of strength and confidence. The music wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't need to be. It spoke for itself, and everyone in the room felt the pull of it. Some teachers leaned forward in their seats, their brows furrowed with surprise. They had heard many students perform over the years, but none had ever captured their attention so completely so quickly. They exchanged glances, silently acknowledging what they were seeing, but not yet daring to believe it. Their expressions were a mix of astonishment and curiosity. Who was this quiet girl? How had they never noticed her talent before? The parents in the audience were equally captivated. Some had come expecting a fun, casual evening, perhaps a chance to see their children perform. They hadn't expected to be caught up in something so powerful, so moving, so unexpectedly beautiful. The subtle intensity of her playing drew them in, forcing them to focus entirely on the music. Even the students who had been joking and whispering moments ago were now silent, unable to look away. They couldn't. Every note she played seemed to touch a part of them they hadn't realized existed. She played with emotion, but not in a way that screamed for attention. It was a quiet, intimate performance, filled with depth and nuance. There was a moment where a soft, trembling note floated in the air, so delicate it felt as if it could break. And yet it was perfect. It carried a vulnerability that was impossible to ignore. Some of the younger students whispered to each other, "Did you hear that? She's amazing." The older students nodded quietly, too stunned to speak. As the piece progressed, it became clear that she wasn't just good. She was extraordinary. Her fingers moved effortlessly across the keys, transitioning from one complex passage to another with flawless precision. The room was completely absorbed. People forgot to breathe. Some sat frozen, mouths slightly open, completely taken in by the performance. Others held their hands over their hearts, feeling the emotional weight of every note. Even the teachers, who had initially assumed this was a joke, couldn't hide their admiration anymore. One leaned toward another and whispered, "I can't believe we never knew she could play like this." The other nodded, eyes wide. They realized that for years they had underestimated her, judging her by her quiet demeanor rather than her skill. And now, in this one moment, all their assumptions were shattered. She didn't play for recognition, but the effect was immediate. People began to recognize not just her talent, but the courage it took to sit at the piano in front of an audience and perform so fearlessly. Her calmness was almost mesmerizing. She had no nervous fidgeting, no anxious glances around the room, no desperate need for approval. She was simply herself, letting her music speak. As she reached the middle of the piece, the tempo shifted subtly. Her hands moved faster now, yet with complete control. Every note was precise, every chord resonant and full of life. The music swelled with emotion, filling the room in a way that made people feel as though they were part of something larger than themselves. It was more than a performance, it was an experience. Some students tried to look confident, to act as though they weren't impressed, but they couldn't help it. Their eyes betrayed them, following every movement of her hands. Their minds were racing, wondering how someone so quiet, so seemingly ordinary, could hold such immense skill within them. They felt a mixture of awe, jealousy, and inspiration all at once. It was a confusing, thrilling sensation, one they had never expected to feel that evening. She didn't pause. Each note flowed into the next effortlessly, creating a narrative that words could never capture. Her performance was like a story being written in real time, a story of patience, discipline, and quiet strength. The music rose and fell like waves, gentle at times, intense at others, pulling the audience along with it. They felt every rise and fall, every gentle touch, every bold strike of the keys. It was as if she was speaking directly to them, each person experiencing the music in their own personal way. A few people instinctively closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Others leaned closer, trying to catch every subtle movement, every delicate nuance. The room had transformed from a casual community event into something sacred, something intimate and unforgettable. The laughter and chatter from earlier seemed like a distant memory. Now, all that existed was the quiet girl at the piano and the powerful, beautiful music that she was creating. Her calm presence contrasted sharply with the intensity of her playing. It was mesmerizing to watch. Some of the students who had been performers themselves felt a pang of humility. They realized that while they had been focused on impressing others, She had been focused on perfecting herself, honing her craft quietly, without anyone noticing. And now, all that hidden dedication was shining through in a way that was impossible to ignore as she reached the climax of the piece, her hands moving with both power and elegance. The notes rang out, filling every corner of the room, vibrating through the wooden floor, echoing off the walls. The audience sat in stunned silence, too overwhelmed to react. Some felt chills run down their spines. Others had tears welling in their eyes, touched by the purity and emotion of what they were hearing. It was clear that this was not just talent. This was something rare, something extraordinary, something that could not be taught or faked. For a brief moment, the world outside the auditorium seemed to disappear. There was no laughter, no whispers, no distractions, just the music and the quiet girl who had dared to let it speak. Every person in the room was fully present, fully alive, fully aware of the power of the moment. They didn't just see her anymore. They felt her. They understood that what they were witnessing was the result of years of hard work, dedication, and an unwavering love for music. When she finally reached the end of the piece, she didn't rush or dramatize the conclusion. She let the final note linger, soft and delicate, then gently released the keys. For a heartbeat, there was complete silence. The room seemed frozen in awe, as if no one could quite believe what had just happened. Then, slowly, almost reverently, the audience erupted into applause. It started softly, almost hesitantly, as if people were testing the reality of what they had experienced. Then it grew louder, stronger, unstoppable. People were clapping, cheering, even standing, unable to contain their astonishment. The teachers, who had been skeptical just moments ago, now approached her with admiration and respect. They wanted to understand, to know how she had achieved something so incredible without anyone realizing her potential before. But she simply smiled, a quiet, gentle smile that reflected her calm nature. She didn't boast. She didn't demand praise. She simply acknowledged their appreciation with grace, letting the music speak for her once more. Some students approached her hesitantly, still in disbelief. How did you learn to play like that?" one asked. Another added, "We never knew you had this talent." She looked at them with soft eyes, and for a moment they could see the truth behind her quiet demeanor. She had always loved music, had always practiced in secret, had always been dedicated to her craft not for recognition, but because it brought her joy. And now, her joy had become a gift for everyone in the room. As the applause continued, she quietly rose from the piano and walked back to her seat. She didn't flaunt her achievement. She didn't seek further attention. She simply returned to the quiet corner where she had started, leaving the audience to process what they had just witnessed. And they did. They talked about her for hours afterward, unable to stop thinking about the performance, unable to forget the way the quiet girl had transformed an ordinary evening into something magical. By the end of the night, one thing was clear: this was a moment no one in the room would ever forget. The quiet girl who had once blended into the background had revealed a depth of talent and emotion that left everyone astonished. She had reminded them that appearances could be deceiving, that quietness didn't equal weakness, and that true brilliance often lives in the most unexpected places. And as she left the auditorium that night, people turned to look at her in a new way. No longer just a quiet face in the crowd. She had become someone unforgettable, a reminder that talent, courage, and dedication can shine brightest when least expected. The moment she returned to her seat, the applause was still echoing through the auditorium. But even as she sat quietly, something had changed. The air in the room felt different now, heavier, charged with an energy that made people sit straighter in their chairs, their attention fully captured. The earlier laughter, the whispers, even the chatter between students and teachers had vanished. They were no longer in a casual evening of performances. They were witnessing something rare, something unexpected, something extraordinary. People began talking quietly among themselves, their voices tinged with astonishment. "Did you see that?" one whispered. "She's not just talented, she's incredible." Another nodded, eyes wide. I never imagined someone so quiet could play like that. Even those who had come to watch casually, not expecting anything remarkable, felt a strange thrill. There was an electricity in the room that was almost tangible, a feeling that something unforgettable had just happened and that they were lucky enough to be there. The teachers were the first to recover from their shock. They moved closer, leaning over to each other, exchanging low murmurs filled with disbelief. "I can't believe we didn't notice her before," one said quietly. "We've seen her every day and no one knew." The other nodded, eyes fixed on her. "She's been practicing in secret all this time, and we never even suspected." They were stunned not only by her skill, but also by the quiet confidence she had shown. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't a need to prove herself. It was a calm mastery that spoke of years of dedication, of hours spent perfecting her craft alone, away from the eyes of anyone who might judge. Some students approached her nervously, almost cautiously, as though speaking to her might disturb the magic of what they had just witnessed. "I didn't know you could play like that," one said softly. Another added, "How long have you been practicing?" She smiled faintly, a gentle smile that didn't need words to express the pride and humility she felt. She didn't answer in a rush, didn't feel the need to explain. Her music had already spoken louder than any words could, but for the audience, the real magic wasn't just in her technical skill. It was in the way she played. Each note carried emotion, each chord told a story, each pause seemed deliberate, almost poetic. The performance wasn't just about hitting the right keys. It was about making people feel something, reaching into their hearts and stirring emotions they didn't even know were there. People leaned forward, their eyes wide, completely absorbed in the delicate yet powerful energy of her playing. Some of the younger students whispered to each other, wide-eyed and amazed. "She makes it look so easy," one said. "But it's not easy." "You can tell?" Another nodded. "It's like the piano is part of her, not just an instrument. She's connected to it somehow." The teachers watched, realizing the truth in those words. The connection between the performer and the piano was extraordinary, almost intimate. Every gesture, every movement, every note seemed to flow naturally, perfectly, as though the instrument and the player were speaking the same language. Even the parents, who had been watching casually at first, were completely drawn in. Some had come expecting to clap politely after each performance, maybe smile at their children's attempts. But now they were silent, completely captivated. Their hearts raced with the music, their emotions shifting with every note. A soft, trembling sound would make them feel a pang of tenderness. A bold, soaring chord would lift their spirits and make them feel awe. They realized that the quiet girl at the piano had created a performance that wasn't just about talent, it was about feeling, about connection, about sharing something real and human with everyone in the room. Her hands moved faster now, yet they were never hurried. Every key she pressed, every chord she struck was controlled and precise, but also full of life. The room felt alive with the energy she created. Some students who had performed earlier felt a mixture of admiration and humility. They had focused on being noticed, on being applauded, on performing for others. She, however, had performed for herself and for the music, and yet in doing so she had captured everyone's attention completely. The teachers whispered quietly to each other, realizing that this moment was one they would never forget. "We need to remember this," one said softly. "This is something rare, something that doesn't happen often." "She has a gift?" The other nodded, eyes still wide with astonishment. They understood that they had witnessed the unveiling of a hidden talent, one that had been quietly growing and waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. As the music continued, the audience became even more absorbed. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, feeling each note deeply. Others watched her hands, mesmerized by the precision and elegance of her movements. There was something almost hypnotic about the way she played, a balance of strength and gentleness that made everyone in the room hold their breath with anticipation. They could sense that this wasn't just a performance, it was a revelation. A moment where ordinary assumptions about people and their Abilities were being shattered, that she reached a delicate section of the piece where the music slowed and softened. The notes were gentle, almost fragile, floating in the air like delicate whispers. The audience leaned in instinctively, captivated by the vulnerability and emotion that poured from her fingertips. There was a sense of intimacy in these moments, as if she were inviting each person individually into her world, sharing something deeply personal and meaningful. People felt their hearts stir, emotions they hadn't expected to experience at a simple community event rising to the surface. Some of the students shifted uncomfortably, realizing how small their earlier judgments had been. They had assumed she was quiet, ordinary, unremarkable. And now, watching her play with such depth and skill, they felt a mixture of awe, humility, and inspiration. It was a lesson in more ways than one, not just about music, but about patience, humility, and the hidden talents that often go unnoticed. As the piece progressed to a more intense section, the room seemed to vibrate with her energy. Her hands moved across the keys with speed and precision, yet with elegance and emotion that made every note feel alive. The audience was completely silent, held in suspense by the unfolding music. Teachers and parents alike exchanged glances, trying to process the brilliance they were witnessing. It was unlike anything they had expected. Every note seemed to tell a story, every chord carried meaning. Every pause was deliberate and intentional. There was a moment when a particularly complex section began, requiring both technical skill and emotional depth. Her fingers danced across the keys effortlessly, each movement precise yet fluid and natural. People in the audience leaned forward, unable to contain their fascination. They whispered to each other in disbelief, marveling at her skill, at the grace and ease with which she navigated the difficult passages. Even those who had been performers themselves found themselves humbled, unable to comprehend how someone so quiet could possess such mastery. The intensity of the performance grew, building to a climax that left everyone on the edge of their seats. The music swelled, powerful and breathtaking, filling the auditorium completely. People felt as if they were being carried along with it, swept up in a wave of emotion that was impossible to resist. The quiet girl at the piano had transformed the room completely, creating an experience that was unforgettable, immersive, and profoundly moving. Even as she played with such intensity, there was a calmness about her, a quiet confidence that set her apart. She was not performing for recognition or applause. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was simply doing what she loved, and in doing so, she had captured the hearts of everyone in the room. The audience felt it instinctively. They understood that this was authentic, genuine, and rare. It was a performance that came from the heart, not from a desire for attention. By the time she reached the final section of the piece, the audience was completely captivated. Some people held their breath, afraid to break the spell. Others felt tears well up in their eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty and emotion of what they were experiencing. The quiet girl who had once blended into the background had become the center of attention, not through words or gestures, but through the undeniable power of her music. As the last notes lingered in the air, soft and fading, the room remained silent for a brief, almost sacred moment. People were too stunned, too moved, too in awe to react immediately. And then slowly applause began. At first it was tentative, almost hesitant, as if people were testing reality. But then it grew louder and stronger, until the entire room was clapping, cheering, and celebrating the remarkable talent they had just witnessed. The teachers approached her, their expressions filled with admiration and wonder. They asked questions, wanting to know how she had achieved such skill, how she had hidden it so quietly for so long. But she simply smiled, calm and humble, not needing to explain herself. The music had spoken for her. It had revealed her talent, her dedication, and her heart in a way that words never could. Even the students who had doubted her, who had whispered and laughed moments before, now looked at her with new respect. They realized that quiet people often hold the most extraordinary abilities, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to shine. And in that moment, the quiet girl had not just The room was completely silent, the kind of silence that feels heavier than words, the kind that makes every heartbeat louder than the quiet around it. Every eye was fixed on her, every ear attuned to the gentle hum of the piano as she prepared to play the next sequence. She sat with perfect calm, her hands poised just above the keys, fingers hovering lightly as though waiting for the right moment to let the music breathe. There was no rush, no sense of nervousness, only focus, and a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from her. The audience had already been amazed. But now they felt a sense of anticipation unlike anything before. They knew they were about to witness something special, something extraordinary. The students who had been chatting nervously before, the teachers who had doubted her at the start, and the parents who had come to enjoy a simple evening of music, all of them were now leaning forward, eyes wide, hearts beating faster with curiosity and excitement. They didn't know exactly what was coming next, but they knew it would be unforgettable. She began slowly at first, a soft, delicate melody that floated through the room like a whisper. It was a contrast to the intensity of the previous sections, yet just as powerful. The audience felt the emotion in each note, the gentle rise and fall, the subtle pauses that carried meaning beyond words. Some people closed their eyes, letting themselves be fully immersed, while others leaned in closer, unable to tear their gaze away. Every movement of her hands was graceful, each finger striking the keys with precision and care, but this was only the beginning. As she continued, the tempo gradually increased, the notes growing bolder, richer, more intense. She seemed to be playing not just with her hands, but with her entire being. Every chord, every sequence seemed to vibrate with life. It was a performance that could not simply be described as music. It was a story being told, a journey through emotion, dedication, and skill. People could feel it deep inside, as if the music was speaking directly to them, touching parts of their hearts they didn't even know existed. The teachers in the front row could hardly believe what they were seeing. They had watched many students perform over the years, but nothing had ever captured their attention like this. They exchanged glances, eyes wide, silently acknowledging that this girl had something rare, something truly exceptional. "She's incredible," one whispered. The other nodded, unable to find words. They could sense the depth of her talent. The years of practice and dedication that had been hidden beneath her quiet demeanor, even the students who had been performers themselves were now sitting in stunned silence. They had often competed for recognition, for applause, for validation. Yet here was someone who had never sought any of that, and her talent had already far surpassed anything they had accomplished. Some whispered to each other, amazed and humbled, "How does she play like that? She makes it look so effortless." Another replied, "It's not just skill, it's her soul in the music. You can feel it." As the piece progressed, the intensity built further. Her hands moved with speed and precision, yet every note remained controlled and clear. The melody rose and fell, creating waves of emotion that washed over the audience. It was mesmerizing to watch, almost hypnotic. People felt as though they were being carried along on a journey, experiencing the highs and lows, the calm moments and the bursts of power, all woven seamlessly together. Some felt tears prickling their eyes, others felt chills run down their spines. Every person in the room was affected in a way they couldn't fully explain. She played with emotion, but never in a way that seemed forced. There was no exaggeration, no showiness, no unnecessary flourish. Every movement was purposeful, deliberate, and full of meaning. The audience realized that she was not performing for them, she was performing for the music itself, letting it guide her, letting it speak through her. And in doing so, she had created something that transcended a simple performance. It was an experience, an intimate connection between her and everyone present. The parents watched, completely captivated, feeling their hearts swell with admiration and wonder. They had come expecting a casual evening, maybe a few polite performances from students. But now they were witnessing something far beyond what they could have imagined. The quiet girl at the piano had taken the ordinary and transformed it into the extraordinary. Her music reached into every corner of the room, filling it with emotion, power, and grace. As the performance continued, She reached the most difficult sections of the piece, passages that required both technical skill and deep emotional understanding. Her fingers danced across the keys with flawless precision, hitting each note perfectly while maintaining a sense of fluidity that made it seem effortless. The audience was completely entranced. They could hardly believe their eyes. Some leaned closer to watch her hands, trying to understand how someone so young and quiet could possess such mastery. Others simply sat back, allowing themselves to be fully absorbed in the beauty of the music. Even the teachers, who had initially doubted her abilities, were now completely awed. One whispered to another, "We underestimated her. All this time she has been hiding a talent we never noticed." The other nodded, eyes fixed on her as if trying to memorize every movement. They realized that this moment was not just remarkable, it was rare, perhaps once in a lifetime. They had witnessed the quiet girl step forward and reveal a level of artistry that could leave anyone speechless. Her performance was not just about speed or complexity. It was about expression. She conveyed emotion in a way that words could never capture. Each note carried meaning, each chord carried weight. The audience felt as if she were speaking directly to their hearts, telling a story without uttering a single word. Some people found themselves holding their breaths during particularly delicate passages, afraid to break the spell. Others felt their emotions rise and fall with the music, experiencing joy, sadness, excitement, and wonder all at once. The intensity of the climax grew, the room vibrating with energy. Her hands moved faster now, yet never lost control. Each note rang out clear and true, each chord resonated with power and precision. The audience was completely absorbed, almost as if time itself had stopped. They were witnessing something rare and precious, a moment that would stay with them forever. Some of the students felt humbled, realizing that talent does not always announce itself loudly. It sometimes waits quietly, hidden until the right moment to shine. As the final notes approached, she played with both power and grace. The music soared, reaching heights that made the audience hold their breath in awe. Every note seemed to carry emotion, depth, and brilliance that was impossible to ignore. Teachers, students, and parents alike felt themselves drawn into the experience, swept along by the intensity and beauty of her playing. It was no longer just a performance, it was a revelation. Then, as if sensing the perfect moment, she slowed down, letting the music soften and fade gently. The final notes lingered in the air, delicate and perfect, like a whisper that refused to vanish. The audience sat in stunned silence, their hearts racing, their minds trying to process what they had just witnessed. The quiet girl, who had seemed invisible just hours ago, had transformed the room, leaving everyone completely frozen in awe. For a few seconds, no one moved. The energy in the room was electric, yet calm, a mixture of reverence and disbelief. People stared at her, trying to take in the reality of what had just happened. The students who had doubted her, the teachers who had underestimated her, the parents who had been casual spectators, they were all united in their astonishment. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a performance that would be remembered long after the lights dimmed and the room emptied. Finally, the silence broke. Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then louder, stronger, unstoppable. People stood to their feet, clapping, cheering, and celebrating the remarkable performance they had just experienced. Some had tears in their eyes, overwhelmed by the sheer beauty of it. Others were smiling, hearts full, unable to stop themselves from showing their admiration. The quiet girl had taken the ordinary and made it unforgettable. The teachers approached her with expressions of awe and respect. They asked questions, wanting to understand how she had hidden such talent for so long. How she could play with such skill and emotion without seeking attention. She simply smiled, calm and gentle, letting the applause speak for her. There was no need for words. Her music had said everything already. Even the students, who had initially doubted her, now looked at her with new understanding. They realized that quiet people often hold hidden depths, talents that are waiting for the right moment to emerge. And in this moment, she had not only revealed her skill, but had taught a lesson. That true brilliance does not always announce itself loudly, but when it appears, it can leave an entire room in awe. As she rose from the piano and returned to her seat, she did so with quiet dignity. She didn't boast, she didn't seek further attention. She simply allowed the moment to exist, letting the audience absorb and appreciate the experience she had created. And they did, silently promising themselves that they would never forget the quiet girl who had walked up to the piano and left everyone frozen in awe. The applause continued, filling the auditorium with a sound that felt almost celebratory and reverent at the same time. People rose to their feet, some clapping with tears in their eyes, others smiling so broadly it was as if their hearts had been touched by something beyond ordinary understanding. The quiet girl had returned to her seat, sitting as calmly as she had when she first arrived. Yet the air around her seemed different now. There was an invisible aura of respect and admiration that seemed to follow her, a recognition that words alone could never capture. The teachers, still trying to comprehend what had just happened, moved closer. Their expressions were a mixture of disbelief, awe, and admiration. "I don't understand," one whispered to another. "How could we have missed this for so long?" The other nodded slowly, eyes fixed on her. "It's not just skill. It's the emotion, the connection. It's everything. She's extraordinary." They exchanged glances, realizing that they had underestimated her for years. It wasn't arrogance or shyness that had kept her hidden, it was simply that her talent had been quietly growing, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Students approached her hesitantly, almost in awe. Some were too shy to speak, standing quietly and simply looking at her with admiration. Others whispered, unable to contain their amazement. "I never knew you could play like that," one said softly. "It's incredible," another added. "How did you do that?" "I mean, all of it. Every note." She smiled faintly, a gentle, quiet smile that didn't need explanation. She didn't rush to answer because the performance had already spoken for her. The music had told her story, shared her dedication, and expressed her emotions far more powerfully than words ever could. Even the parents, who had arrived expecting a casual evening of music, were completely captivated. They had seen many performances over the years, but this was different. The quiet girl had created something that transcended ordinary music, a deep, emotional connection that left the audience feeling touched, inspired, and almost reverent. Some parents leaned over to whisper to each other, their eyes wide with amazement. "Did you hear that? She's something else entirely." Another parent nodded, tears welling in their eyes. "I've never felt anything like that before. It was real, pure, beautiful." The auditorium buzzed quietly with conversations, not the loud chatter that had filled it earlier, but a soft, reverent murmur. People discussed the performance, each sharing what had touched them most. Some spoke of her technical skill, of the precision and control in her hands. Others spoke of the emotion, the way she seemed to communicate directly with the hearts of everyone present. And all of them agreed on one thing. They had never expected to see something so extraordinary from someone so quiet, someone who had always blended into the background. Her calmness, which had once made people overlook her, now became part of her mystique. She didn't seek attention, didn't demand recognition, and yet she had captivated everyone in the room. People realized that her quiet demeanor was not a lack of talent or confidence. It was a strength. It was a sign of humility, patience, and the inner confidence that allowed her to focus entirely on her craft without distraction. She had shown them that true talent does not need to announce itself loudly. It can be quiet, reserved, and still leave a lasting impression that no one can forget. Some of the students, who had previously performed, felt a shift inside themselves. They had often focused on recognition, applause, and being noticed, but watching her had changed their perspective. They realized that talent was not about showing off or being the center of attention. It was about dedication, passion, and a deep connection to what one loved. And in that lesson they found inspiration. Some of them even approached her quietly to ask questions about her practice, eager to learn from someone who had achieved so much through dedication and patience rather than showmanship. The teachers gathered themselves and approached her with admiration and curiosity. "We've never seen anyone play like that," one said, still trying to process the performance. "How long have you been practicing?" she responded softly, almost shyly, explaining that music had always been a part of her life, that she had spent years practicing in private, driven by passion rather than the desire for recognition. The teachers listened, their expressions filled with respect and wonder. They understood that her performance had not been a sudden display of talent but the result of years of quiet, dedicated work. Some of the audience members lingered longer than usual after the performance. Unable to leave the auditorium immediately, they walked slowly, discussing what they had witnessed, replaying the music in their minds. They were struck not only by the skill and emotion but also by the quiet power of her presence. She had taken the ordinary and made it extraordinary, showing them that talent often hides in unexpected places. It was a moment that would linger in their memories for a long time. The applause had ended, yet the energy in the room remained. The quiet girl at the piano had left a mark that went beyond admiration. People felt a sense of connection to her, a recognition of the courage it took to step forward and share one's passion with others. Some students approached her to offer congratulations. Others simply watched from afar, still amazed by what they had just seen. Even those who had been skeptical or dismissive at the beginning were now filled with awe. In the quiet moments after the performance, she returned to her seat with calm dignity. She didn't seek further attention, didn't bask in praise. She allowed the experience to exist naturally, letting the audience fully absorb what had just occurred. People around her whispered, nodded, and smiled, understanding that they had been part of something rare and unforgettable. Her humility added to the respect she commanded, reinforcing the lesson that true greatness does not need to shout, it simply exists. Quietly, powerfully, and profoundly. As the audience gradually began to leave, conversations continued to echo with admiration. "I can't believe she played like that," one person said. "And she didn't even seem nervous." Another added, "It's inspiring. She's proof that quiet people can hold incredible strength." Teachers, students, and parents alike left the auditorium carrying a sense of wonder, knowing that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Even after the room emptied, the memory of her performance lingered. Those who had been present found themselves replaying the music in their minds, remembering the delicate notes, the sweeping melodies, and the quiet power she had brought to the piano. Some students, inspired by what they had seen, resolved to practice more diligently, to approach their own passions with the same dedication and humility. Others simply smiled, feeling grateful to have witnessed a moment of true artistry and human expression. The quiet girl herself left the stage with grace, unnoticed by many as she walked through the empty corridors. She didn't need recognition. She didn't seek validation. Her reward had already come in the form of the music itself, the connection she had made with her audience, and the knowledge that she had shared a part of herself in the most honest way possible. She had performed not for applause, not for praise, but for the joy of the music, and in doing so, she had left a lasting impact on everyone who had been fortunate enough to witness it. In the days and weeks that followed, her performance became the talk of the community. Teachers, students, and parents spoke of it repeatedly, amazed that someone so quiet, so unassuming, could hold such immense talent. But she didn't change. She remained the same quiet, humble person she had always been. The applause, the admiration, the praise, it was all secondary to her. What mattered most was the music, the connection, and the pure joy of expressing herself in a way only she could. Her story became a quiet inspiration for everyone around her. Students learned that appearances can be deceiving, that quiet people often hold hidden strengths, and that dedication and passion can create moments that touch hearts in ways nothing else can. Teachers learned to look beyond first impressions, to notice the potential that exists even in those who don't seek the spotlight. And parents learned that talent and courage often emerge quietly, waiting for the right moment to shine. In the end, the quiet girl who had walked up to the piano and played with such skill and emotion left a lasting legacy, not just through her music, but through the lesson she taught everyone present. She showed that greatness does not always announce itself loudly, that talent can be hidden beneath the surface, and that courage and passion can transform an ordinary moment into something unforgettable, even long after the event was over. People continued to talk about that night. They remembered the way her fingers had danced across the keys, the emotion in every note, the calmness that contrasted so perfectly with the intensity of her playing. They remembered the lesson she had taught without saying a single word, that true talent and courage are often quiet. Yet they can leave an impact that echoes far beyond the moment, and though the applause had faded and the audience had left, she remained the same gentle, quiet person she had always been. She didn't seek fame or attention. She didn't need validation. Her reward was in the music itself, in the connection she had shared, and in the knowledge that she had touched the hearts of everyone who had been lucky enough to listen. And in that quiet, powerful way, she left a mark on the world that no one,